Hi, I'm Janie Helms, and will be talking about the major brain regions and how it is split up and what functions that they perform. This is for my Topic 2 Central Nervous System presentation. The first thing I want to talk about is an overview of what those major regions are of the brain. The three main regions are the brainstem, cerebellum, and the forebrain. Now, as you can see in this picture, it lays out each different section of the brain that I will talk about today. So down at the bottom, you have the brainstem, and then you have the cerebellum, and then up here at the top is going to make up the forebrain. So I'm going to go into details on each part, and I can reference back to this picture as we go along. I'm going to start with the brainstem. The brainstem is the oldest region in evolutionary terms. For humans, before our brains were developed into the higher or more complex parts, there was the brainstem. So it is the oldest region that we know of. It's found at the base of the brain, and it's the control center for the cardiovascular, circulatory, respiration, and digestive systems. Right above the brainstem is the cerebellum. It is located right there. It's still considered at the base of the brain or the underside of the brain, but it is above the brainstem. It helps maintain your body's position, and it helps aid in learning motor skills. So if I go back to the image here, at the very bottom, you have the brainstem. The cerebellum is right above it, still attached to the back, but still right above it. The forebrain. So the forebrain is connected or separated into two sections. We call it the diencephalon and the cerebrum. The first part, it's split up into the hypothalamus and the thalamus. With that, it's more towards the middle or center of the brain, where the thalamus being in the most middle central part of it. The hypothalamus helps regulate our body temperature, understand thirst. It handles urine output and your food intake. It's an important communication link between our nervous system and the endocrine system. So that's where the urine outtake and those other parts come into play with the thirst. The thalamus is considered the relay station, if maybe you would call it. It has all of the synaptic input. So it is going to help with sensory processing. It's pretty much the control center for that. It makes us aware or conscious about things and plays a role in our motor control. The cerebrum, another part of the forebrain, it is like the diencephalon, where it has two parts to it. It's made up of the basal nuclei, or also has been called basal ganglia, as well as the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is kind of like a top hat. It kind of fits over the top part of the brain, covers a lot of the parts, and it encases the basal nuclei, which, if I look in terms compared to the thalamus, we say that it is lateral. So if I go back to that image, here is, so right here in this area in the center is the hypothalamus, and then the thalamus is right in the very, very center. This whole region up here on top, right through here, this is the cerebrum. There's the basal nuclei and the cerebral cortex. So the next part, I'm going to talk about the cerebral cortex, as well as the basic parts of what the basal nuclei do for us. Now, the basal nuclei, or the basal ganglia as it is also called, this is where our fine-tuned motor skills come in. It helps coordinate those slow and kind of sustainable movements that we make. And then the cerebral cortex, we're going to go into more detail on. There is a lot involved. It is the majority of the brain. It makes up 80% of the weight. And what happens is that top half of the brain, it is separated into two halves. And those two halves are connected. So even though it's split, they are still connected. And it is connected, as they call it, by an information superhighway. It's called the corpus callosum. And it allows for communication between the two halves so that they can cooperate with each other. So both hemispheres, even though two separate halves, both those hemispheres do mirror each other. However, they do have some uniqueness in how they handle a body's behavior. The left hemisphere is usually, not all the time, but it is usually the dominant side, and it does hold one major difference or controls one major area more than the right side. So again, usually they mirror each other. Usually things are leveled out evenly, nice and balanced. However, our language center, okay, the biggest part of our brain that allows us to speak, process words, remember those words, that is housed on the left. Now, there are studies about, especially with people who have strokes, they've been wondering, could the right side make up for damage to that language center in the left if it had been damaged, for example, from a stroke? So there is ongoing research. Nothing completely definite that I have found in my research, but there are ongoing studies to see if that could be helped, if it could evenly be separated or the right hemisphere make up for what the left loses. So if the left is your dominant side, these are typically right-handed people. And if you think about it, there are usually more right-handed people in the world. So the reason for this, your brain is going to send messages down through your spinal cord. And as it goes from up there in the cerebral cortex down to the spinal cord, it actually crosses over to the opposite side of your body. So the left side goes to the right, and the right side goes to the left. Now, again with the forebrain, those halves, they are separated into two halves. But each half is also separated into 4 lobes that have very specific functions. So on each half, left and right, there is an optical, there's a temporal lobe, a parietal lobe, and a frontal. It's hard for me to say that name. Occipital, that portion, that lobe is found on the very back. This is where the visual input comes in. That's where it relays that information to us. It's where that connection, that initial process of visual is carried through. Temporal, they're on the sides, so around your ears if you were to think about your head, and they are going to help and aid in hearing and receiving sounds. The parietal is going to be responsible for receiving and processing sensory things like, feeling hot and cold, those specific things that help us feel. Then the frontal, by name, it is in the front, And this is a very large portion of what you think about in your brain. It helps with voluntary movement. It houses the speaking memory departments and our elaboration of thought, meaning the problem solving, mathematical, those thought processes. That frontal lobe is where all of that occurs. So going back to our original picture, here we have the brain stem at the very bottom. It connects to the spinal cord. The cerebellum that's right above it, still at the base of the brain. You have the hypothalamus and the thalamus right here in the central area. And then you have the cerebral cortex up here that pretty much caps the brain like a hat. And it is separated into the 4 lobes that we mentioned right here. So visual, hearing, feelings, speaking, and movement. So each part of our brain, every region, has a very special part. And as a whole, of all these lobes and all of these major components, the forebrain, the brainstem, the cerebellum, all of them work together as a single function to help our entire body work. The picture where I show this was taken out of our textbook. Very nice, pretty picture. And then this was found in a general biopsychological book. So it was a nice picture that showed the different colors for the parts of the lobe and where they can be found. And then here are the references. Thank you for listening to my presentation.